And we are live. Tucker Carlson interviews a man who claims he had homosexual relations with Barack Obama. Somehow, even at its most garbage, propaganda gets people. Not only that, Vivek Ramaswamy is still Indian. Nothing's changed, unfortunately. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Civil Offense. My name is Ahmed Mlih, and today we are talking about propaganda, how prevalent it is in media, how media has to do with elections and its reporting on it, and just really talking about maybe some political party stuff, maybe some of that Tucker Carlson and Obama stuff. But we are here with Ancat, who was on the brink of dealing severe back shots. How are you, Ancat?
Hey, I'm doing amazing. Yeah, I mean, hey, Tucker Carlson, he must be 100% right on the Obama gay sex thing. I'm all
I
for it.
mean,
I honestly think
Larry,
that
I
Obama,
did.
I honestly think that Obama probably is bi.
I
Like
watched the
I could,
Larry Sinclair interview in its completion, and honestly, it to be fair to Larry, it actually the details do make sense. And he also did say he just thinks Obama's bisexual. So we
yeah,
will
but
get
like,
into that.
yeah, but like, did he give any evidence for it, or was it just a bunch of
You know,
anecdotes?
okay, so real quick, like one thing that did line up pretty well was that he was somebody who was able to identify that Obama had marriage problems back in 1999 before it was reported by anybody, even Obama himself. So his side of the story is basically like, oh, well, Obama didn't even say this. Nobody was saying this. I was the only one saying this before Obama himself said it, like last year or something like that. As one thing that he provided as well as evidence, and I guess I can get into it a little bit since I did just watch this. I'm fresh off it. Larry said that there was he never, when he reached out to the campaign, because he reached out to the campaign about him doing drugs with Obama, but he just wanted Obama to be telling the truth about his drug use, not even the sex stuff. Like he didn't even mention the sex stuff to the actual campaign when he was talking to them about it, and then they reached out back
Right.
to him about the sex stuff. He didn't even reach out to them about that. They reached out to him about that, so they knew. And I don't know. So pretty much, some of the stuff he's saying, if he's like accurate in those statements, it actually provides some evidence that, well, hey, at least they might have like done drugs together. I don't know about the sex stuff for sure, but it would make more sense that like he's met the guy and they've done something. At least maybe he could be making part of it up. I don't know. But anyway, some real announcements real quick before we do get into all of this. Make sure you go to ahmedmali.com, sign up for my email list for the latest updates. Check out Civil Offense on Rumble, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. And the Discord server is invite only now, so you're definitely gonna have to hit me up about that if you want to join. But yeah, I'll probably leave my Discord user in the description afterward. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, today we're basically talking about propaganda. This was a topic that Ancat brought to me as something that he specifically wanted to discuss, since we've been talking about a lot of how it's done with the anti-establishment candidates in the 2024 campaign, specifically like Vivek, even Trump, and so on, and just media narratives in general being prevalent right now. But I guess I'm just going to go ahead and let you talk about some of the reason I would say you brought this to me, and maybe you yourself could give an introduction as to what you're interested in talking about today.
Yeah, sure. So the reason why I wanted to bring up propaganda specifically, and we had touched upon this before, in DMs or in private chat, but basically that we've been primarily focusing on the elections and sort of the impossibility or the problematic um, assumptions with like libertarians or really anyone trying to like use political means in order to essentially achieve their ends. And but we haven't really touched upon specifically a lot of like the more in-depth topics with regards to the state media and like how much the state particularly owns the media, how much propaganda is useful for the state, the nature of propaganda itself, among like a variety of things. And I figure that those are some of the things that I think would probably just make a great stream. So I mean, we can touch upon really any one of those at any time, and I could give a detail of what I think about
Yeah.
it. But
So I suggest the first thing that we could just touch over is the fact that people are going to look at this and say, and most likely your average person, or even I would say even if you're more libertarian in the way you identify, you still may be politicized, and you still may ask this question, and you may say, well, what exactly is the state doing to spread propaganda through the media? Like, how do we know that the media is this vessel for the state? How do we know if it's this thing that the state can use to propagandize the public anyway?
Yeah, well, we can know specifically because we can point out that it's in within the state's interest to have a systematized propaganda program. Well, more specifically, that we can point to their specific ownership of both the education, um, well, I don't want to say establishment, but the entirety of most academia and um, primary school education. That basically whatever narratives are going to be promoted through these institutions are essentially going to be ones that benefit the state at its core. And we can point to specifically what those narratives are, but we can at least identify the fact that, hey, if this narrative or this story is being promoted in one of the larger major media outlets, or you were taught this as a young child, we definitely know that it came from the state, or at the very least was allowed by the state to to exist within its socio-political order. You know,
Yeah, and I
and then
mean,
of course we can like get into the details of specifically what institutions are run by the state, specifically with regards to the media, because I don't think like education is very controversial. I mean, we know the state crafts education, or at the very least, has a pretty strong stranglehold on it.
well, what I was going to say there before we could go into that is just, I mean, like if you're wondering about how the state owns these things, I mean, like the first thing you could look at is licensing and regulations. Who lets,
Right.
for example, the actual like news media broadcast on television? Like who's the one determining who's allowed to do that? Who's the one that is involved with, I guess, well, not necessarily directly choosing like the exact people that get hired, but they kind of do by that like pick the higher ups essentially by allowing certain media companies to operate. Let's see. Ignis says gay. Okay. Well, thank you. That was
You're
obviously a
gay.
big comment. Ignis hates us now. It's so over. But yeah, I mean, like they have a lot of ways of doing this, and like you're right to point out education as well. But they have like control over like I mean, obviously like publishing in general as well. All of these things operate within the white market, so obviously the state can control these things. But yeah, I would like to hear more on like the actual like what encompasses the media, like what is under this umbrella.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned licensing as well. I before I like touched upon that, I did want to touch upon licensing because that is a really important, it's a really important point to hit home. All of these, due to regulations, pretty much all of these essentially giant media outlets, in order to be at the position that they are within sort of the general media landscape and to have this much power, they have to go through a numerous amount of financial and legislative hoops, all of which are set up by the state. And if the state doesn't like the way that they're conducting their business, they maybe don't have to revoke their license, but well, and obviously they can, but even they can even hold that threat of licensing leverage against them. And in addition to licensing, there are like a million different ways that the state can um, and does influence broadcast media. Like they can they might not even target the media outlets directly, but they could directly target the private firms that are funding them, for instance. So they could target like big donors. They could regulate and hammer home and hammer down on these institutions funding the media. They could hammer down on hiring practices, like the way that you hire people, for instance. They could hammer home on just vi- basically an infinity of things to essentially control and regulate their behavior in a manner that's most substantive toward the state. And it's not to say that oh, like literal CIA agents are writing the scripts, which I think that they are to a large extent, but even getting aside that, we know basically all of the, for just that reason alone, we know that these narratives being promoted, regardless of what ideology the media outlets have to show, whether that be something like Fox News or CNN, which like claim to have different ideologies. We know that they're both essentially controlled and regulated by the same organization. So these different media outlets, they might be they might be advertising to different people, but ultimately, um, the they essentially serve different functions for the state. But yeah, sorry, I went off a tangent. If you want to
Yeah, but I actually
get
want to
me
cut
back
in
on
here.
track.
Yeah, I want to cut in here to what you just said because I even though maybe the CIA is writing the scripts, I don't think it necessarily has to be the case just because of the fact that a collection of indirect pressures can pretty much amount to the same as direct influence or like direct control. Let's see. So we got Mr. Merchant saying not to be the highlight comment of the stream, but if anti-establishment quote unquote people support the state and quote unquote working within the system, that is when you should be the most skeptical and have red flags, of course. And he said going off in your head. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Uh,
and we've touched upon that in other streams as well, but
yeah, as we have like with these candidates, because we went over it, we've pretty much hammered in that like these 2024 candidates, and I mean any political candidate, but we've highlighted a lot of the candidates in that election just because there's so many that are saying, well, I'm the guy that's going to take down these corporate people, these cronies, these people that are puppets for the corporate establishment and the political establishment, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to be the one that fixes everything. I'm going to be like not necessarily the words draining the swamp, but essentially the exact same narrative.
yeah, I think we've hammered home pretty well right off the bat. The problems with pretty much every single 2024 political candidate and sort of the narratives like being crafted around this election cycle. So really, all we need to do is once 2024 actually hits, we just show the older versions of these streams whenever like we want to talk about specific. They make a claim about RFK. We just show the RFK stream or the Ramaswamy
Yeah.
stream or whatever. That's pretty
Yeah.
much all we have to do at
And
this point.
I mean, we could look at specific tactics that they use to get advantage and to make themselves seem better in the eyes of the people. And I mean, we will go into exactly how the media reports on elections as well, and go more into depth with that because I don't think we have so much so with that, and I think that would be something good to highlight. But I would say I think it would be a good time to talk about Tucker Carlson himself, not necessarily just the gay Obama stuff, but actually point to him as rather than being somebody that's the anti-establishment within politics and the elections and all that. We have Tucker Carlson, who's this guy that's supposedly the anti-establishment person within media, the guy that broke free from the Fox News establishment and was somehow, even when he was in Fox News, was somehow saying stuff they didn't like, and then for some reason just got fired because they said something he didn't like, as if they just like found out about him years later or something. Let's see. So you best mention Operation Mockingbird. Ignis says,
Yeah,
yes,
actually,
we will.
yeah, actually, I did want to mention, yeah, before we get into, Enigmas, you made a good point. Before I want to get into sort of the, like the Cucker Tarleson stuff, I wanted
The
to
Cucker
just.
Carlson? Did you say
No,
Cucker?
I did that don't worry, I
Okay.
did that intentionally.
Okay.
But yeah, before we,
I don't know if I can
but
show this chat on stream.
what? Oh
There's
God,
a
I'm
chat
not
from
even
this guy.
seeing it.
I'm just gonna read it without putting it on stream because I don't think I could do it. Faithless Berserker. I just watched that F word Obama story and that was hilarious. Okay, thank
Yeah,
you for
the
that.
consequence of Esso's chat getting in here. But
I
anyway,
mean, it's a good comment. I'll give you that. It's just I don't know that YouTube will allow me
yo,
to do that
true.
without being nuked.
Yeah, you're probably
Yeah,
right. But yeah, I
go
wanted
ahead.
to yeah, so like before we talk about sort of the, I guess, more theoretical foundations of propaganda, which I'm very much new to, like I'll admit, but I feel like I have a bit more of a sophisticated grasp on it than I think a lot of libertarians do. Um, and I think, and again, we can like touch upon that later, but I specifically wanted to touch upon more the like specific programs and reasons as to why, because we're sort of just making the claim that, oh, well, the state kind of de facto runs the media, but not really like backing it up other than just saying Operation Mockingbird or that they do. So I kind of wanted to get into some of like the programs and some of the ways that we know, like we know that like the media, and by the media I'm referring to, you know, the major humongous outlets, New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, other larger like more conservative outlets as well. Most media in like the white, most like giant outlets within the white market, for instance. There are obviously some that of course act legally, like, you know, James Corbett or whatever, but like primarily focusing on the ones that um essentially garner the most audience attention.
All right.
But yeah, I guess like I guess I
Yeah.
could just jump straight in. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, go ahead.
So first thing that we pointed out was Operation Mockingbird, and for those who don't know, basically was a CIA program launched in the early 50s, I think. Um, Essentially a giant program where they had a bunch of journalists and well, sorry, not quote unquote CIA journalists, quote unquote, basically a bunch of CIA agents posing as journalists to infiltrate a bunch of major media outlets. And this is a revealed, leaked government document. This isn't like, you know, some conspiracy theory stuff. This is like you can look at the actual documentation that explains this, but essentially they had agents infiltrate the Washington Post, Time Magazine, Life, New York Times, CBS, just to name a few. But they infiltrated, I believe, 25 like major outlets. They essentially they I think they admitted that there were at least over the CIA director William Colby testified to one of the congressional committees that over 400 CIA agents were active in the U.S. media at some point, infiltrating both television and magazines. So, and again, that's just what they've admitted to.
Oh, so Ignis
So
says
the
additionally, they
oh,
laundered
they
sources of
actually
stories to have it republished by legitimate journalists unaffiliated directly with their programs, if I remember correctly.
Okay, yeah, yeah, you might know. I think you probably know more about the program than I do, but essentially the fact remains the same: is that yeah, in the 1950s and 60s, the CIA openly had openly had its agents having a vast amount of influence in media, and the states obviously had influence before this. There have been programs back during World War II where they, well, and they still do this, where they have the CIA literally write scripts. Basically every movie that comes out nowadays that has like the military in it or has anything to do with the U.S. government specifically, the CIA writes almost all of them.
I wonder if that applies to Sound of
Well,
Freedom.
huh?
I wonder if that applies to Sound of Freedom.
Oh, yeah, 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 I remember you were showing me that, but yeah, no, it most definitely would.
No, but
And I
it's
guess
it's the
to clarify,
it's the conservative, like salvation in Hollywood. Like, Hollywood didn't want this
yeah,
movie to come
yeah.
out, right?
Oh
The
yeah,
left,
no,
the
they
left was
hated the movie.
suppressing it.
The radical Hollywood left.
Yeah, that's why I got ads for
Um,
it on Instagram.
yeah, exactly. To clarify though, like I probably should make more specific. The CIA isn't, you know, drafting and writing the scripts. They go in and basically after the scripts are done, they go in and edit anything that they want in or out. So they essentially have final say on those movies, and it's the same for any movie, really. But but you know, according to some leaked documents and some, you know, some things that have been revealed about the CIA, is that yeah, the movies they primarily target are the ones that, or at least the ones they have targeted in the past, have primarily been ones with regard to like the Middle East, or agencies with regards to the CIA. In fact, I wonder if the Snowden movie was targeted from it. I have no idea, but
Yeah, that's
could
actually
be,
a
could
pretty
have
good
been.
question, but why would it not be, right? That seems like an important one to do. I don't know.
Right.
I can't remember because I did watch it. I just can't remember exactly what the framing was there. It's like he was still the hero in the movie, of course, because otherwise people would have been like, "What is this?" Then they would have been like, "Well, what is this? CCP China? No, we're a free country. We need our heroes to be represented as such." But still, maybe they're still represented as, or I guess the government agencies themselves are just represented as, oh well, the people within them are corrupt. I'm sure that was it, if it was, but I just can't remember exactly what it was.
Yeah, I'd have to rewatch the movie to remember,
Yeah,
but
and I mean, if anything,
well,
like
but well, yeah, but and the problem is, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, like, when he released the information, it was pretty much just seen as like, okay, well, here he's stopping the corruption, right? Like he's stopping people that shouldn't be doing this from doing it, and that's the reason it's happening, because they just have their own interests of spying on people and stuff. And I don't know. I would assume that was it.
Yeah, and but there is a problem though with movies like that, and it's that you usually if they don't make like anything explicitly anti-political, you're essentially going to have pretty much everyone in that audience filling in their own narrative of what the meaning of the film is. So for instance, like, if the film says, "Oh yeah," like let's just say the film's overall message is blatantly, the state is surveilling on you. Well, like depending on who's going to be in that audience, you're going to have a different, you know, reaction to that, and solution that's going to pop into your head. Like a Marxist would have popped into their head, oh well, obviously, yeah, that's a result of the capitalist bourgeois, and we need to we need to vote in Bernie Sanders because he said something vaguely once about ending the surveillance state. Or a conservative is going to be like, oh yeah, no, that but RFK was totally right. Whereas, like, if me or you were watching it, we'd be like, oh well, okay, well, we need to undermine the state's broadcasting media, we don't need to elect these candidates.
Yeah, and to be fair, it might have just been what I was filling in my head back when I watched it, because it's been years, and that's why I don't remember every single
Right.
detail from it. And it might have just been that at the time, since I was politicized back then, I was just probably doing that and not even realizing it.
Right. Yeah, and but I guess we should probably get into some of the more some of the other ways that we at least at the very least know definitively that the state de facto owns the media. So all these media companies are basically just government just government organizations at the end of the day. So we pointed out Mockingbird, which is like the one that most libertarians rightfully point to. Um, but also organizations like the FCC, the FTC, like they're basically just they're essentially just puppets for these. They're just regulatory. Bureau- Essentially, the FTC and the FCC are essentially de facto like uh, they're essentially just bureaucratic agencies that direct um, those media outlets what they can and can't publish at the end of the day. Um, so you could sort of see them as like the highest level of management within those bureaucracy forms. It's not the CEOs of those companies; it's the agents of the state in like the FCC.
Right, and I
And then of
mean,
course, yeah,
there could be also people informing them, how they're supposed to do this and like what they're supposed to regulate. It's not necessarily that they're just going, oh well, I don't like this, and therefore, I need to do this.
yeah, exactly. And then of course we can point to like the like financiers like InQtel, for instance, which is basically a CIA front group. We can point to like the fact that Google's origin lies partly within the CIA and NSA. We know pretty much that every major or major company um, has at the very least, like Facebook, like Google, like Twitter, are essentially required by the state to have backdoors to essentially allow them to access anyone's information at any time. So if, let's say, like, Facebook, Google, Twitter, they all harvest people's data. If the state wanted to access that data at any time, they very easily could, just through a legislative decree. Just be like, okay, hey, we need information on this person. Give us everything that you know, and that's what any company within the white market um, is at the end of the day required to do.
Yeah, I wonder why Facebook asked you to or to verify your legal name with a government ID. I wonder why Elon Musk is saying, or what has been saying for a while now, we need to get rid of anonymity on X or Twitter or whatever it is. We need to put an end to this. We need more verification.
Yeah, this
It's
whole
pretty
this whole
obvious.
idea that,
Yeah.
yeah, like, that Elon Musk also isn't some kind of government crony, or at the very least works within their interests. I don't know. Like, I feel like people are sort of deluding themselves at this point,
He
thinking
doesn't even
that.
hide it because like he'll say
Yeah,
something about the well, I don't remember exactly what he said about the Mar-a-Lago stuff, but I don't know if this was the exact case or what, but there was this point at which people were saying like end the FBI, abolish it and whatever. I think he was talking about he's like, well, to be clear, I'm pro FBI. Like I just think that we need to make sure that it's being held accountable, guys. And pretty much like he wants to work with these like government organizations. Obviously, I mean like they're the ones that gave him money for his company, and they're the ones that have been funding him this whole time. So like it would make sense that he's he has close ties with them, and therefore he wants to play ball. I mean, to continue being a billionaire, continue. Well, I mean, even if he still is a billionaire, I mean, just continue like enjoying the satisfaction of not being targeted because he's actually doing something subversive, but he's not, and that's why he's not targeted.
right. And you sort of see this too with like people like Carlson, who seem to basically, like, I feel like at the end of the day, the reason, at the very least, why he was put onto Twitter is because I'm, this is of course speculation, but it seems, based on how I've seen him act and just sort of the, internal dynamics between Twitter and Tucker Carlson, is that it seems very likely to me that he was likely, after he was ousted by Fox, had some sort of backdoor deal with Musk to essentially get on Twitter, promote his platform, essentially be an advertisement for Twitter, and and then in an effort to gain more traffic on that platform.
Well, yeah, it's funny that around this exact time, this is when like
Because
Elon's
if you
setting
look
up.
at, like,
Well. It's funny around. Let me say around this exact time, Elon wants to set up Twitter or X as like this video platform now. Like he wants streaming to be something big on the actual platform itself. And this is the exact time that Tucker's posting his first episode, and you're seeing like, oh, these record-breaking numbers for Tucker on views. Like
right,
so many people are
yeah.
flocking to Twitter and subscribing, and now there's a subscription service for Twitter and so on and so forth. And also, I was just going to mention like as far as backdoor deals, the reason I'm sure Tucker, like, being on X isn't subversive is because of the fact that like Tucker had this deal. Well, I guess in his contract with Fox News, it's still stipulated, according to, I heard this from Patrick Bet David, or at least somebody that he was associated with. He was on the show while this was being talked about, like a Fresh and Fit episode where he was telling them about this. Oh, Tucker didn't come to us, but there were people he couldn't actually go to because Fox News was telling him, you can't associate with these people. We don't want you going to these people after you leave us. So basically, like, Tucker has to go to a specific network after the fact. I mean, he can't, I mean, they'll say like, oh, it's to avoid him from going to competition, but maybe they don't want him going to anybody subversive for real. Maybe they're fine with him going to X because X isn't subversive, and it's fine to be on there. But yeah, I mean, like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's still some sort of involvement there. Like, I don't know exactly who his staff is, but how much you want to bet some people just supposedly like flocked from Fox to Tucker's news show to help him out. Like, oh, they quit because of principle or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised. Or I mean, like, if there's some sort of other string still attached to Fox News, I just would not be surprised.
Oh yeah, no, and like, even if there wasn't any direct ties, that it's still essentially him moving his exact same brand that works for him, or that, that, it's not like he's, oh well, he was handed these CIA scripts, and they all look exactly the same. Then now he's off the mainstream Fox News and on Twitter now, um promoting the exact same scripts, and now he's that means now he's different or whatever. Basically it's just him hopping from one government agency to the next. He's done this pretty much throughout his whole life. I mean, before he was on Fox News, he was on platforms like MSNBC and
Yeah.
CNN until he got off. So I think he just, he's an obvious grifter, and I think he fits in with whatever grift he feels like
You know
he
what
feels like being a part of at
realization
that point.
You know what the realization I just had was with what I said earlier about him, like, supposedly somehow being under the radar of Fox News until they decided to fire him. Well, wouldn't that mean that everything he said up until like one thing was like not subversive to Fox whatsoever? If you believe it's the case that they fired him because he said something wrong, like basically the fact is, like, apparently in your perspective, that everything he said up until that one thing they fired him for was actually allowable by Fox News, which is somehow like this like supposed like corrupt, like it's run by corrupt people that have these corrupt interests and so on and so forth. I mean, like, yeah, we don't like them, like we state exactly why they're a problem, but the fact being, like, if you believe it's this ideological thing and like something just couldn't be said, like what, it was that one thing that he got fired for supposedly that was like the thing that just ended it all for him. Like, how does that work?
Well, regardless of why he even was fired in the first place, it's awfully convenient at the very least that this just deals a massive like the firing from Fox News was probably one of the best things to happen in his career, because now he has more traffic to that platform and streaming numbers than ever. I mean, even if he doesn't have an official contract deal with Twitter anymore, he's still riding high off those millions of dollars, and he's essentially going to be getting that same amount of money traffic within, regardless whether essentially that's probably going to be made up by the compensating, skyrocketing views on Twitter, on his him getting like book deals, him getting more interviews, him getting more press coverage with, like, invited to, speaking events, etc. So, it's this massive deal in publicity that I feel like is definitely going to make up for the lack of a $3+ million a year contract that he has with Fox. I think it's way more than that, to be honest.
So
But
Ignis says Tucker speaks about how he was never told what to say outright. Well, that still doesn't refute my point that like somehow everything he was saying up until he got fired was allowable by Fox itself. I mean, do you
I
have
don't
any
know if
thoughts
he
on
was
that?
trying to refute your point. I mean,
No, no, no. Well,
I
I'm
don't know
just
if he
saying.
was
Well,
trying
I'm
to
not. I'm
refute
not
your.
saying that it
Yeah,
was.
but
I'm just
yeah,
saying
yeah,
like. I'm just saying like it.
right,
It wouldn't do anything about that point. So I would ask him to challenge that point if like he agrees with Tucker on this. Is what my point is, or not necessarily agrees with Tucker on what he was
right.
never allowed to say outright, but like if he thinks that makes the case for why Tucker was still like able to say subversive things, like, well, then how was that the case? I mean, like, how would that say something about what I just said?
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, like, do you
Um,
want to actually go into I don't know if you wanted to wrap anything up there as far as the actual institutions themselves, but we do have the clip we were talking about beforehand with Tucker just basically talking about well, not necessarily Operation Mockingbird, but it has to do with the topic.
yeah, I know that,
Oh,
like,
well,
there are other
Ignis says
platform
that was in Ignis says that was in response to handed CIA scripts.
hidden CIA scripts. Sorry,
Like
I'm a
as in
bit
Tucker,
lost.
well, as in Tucker wasn't handed CIA scripts, he was never told directly what to say. That's the
Oh,
claim he's
I
making. Yeah.
see. I see. Yeah, yeah. I don't think that I'm not like being completely literal, because I think in all likelihood he probably writes his scripts themselves, but again, he's working for basically a de facto government agency, on top of him, being widely promoted um, by the state and state media, as well as just him being a very excellent propagandist as well. So
Yeah, but you
um,
were wrapping
I
it up.
think I think I think he's just, what was that?
No, sorry. Like, well, you can continue on that point. I was just going to get back to what we were saying before.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I'm basically finished with what I had
Okay.
to say in that regard.
Yeah. So basically, what I had just mentioned was that we were going to go over that Tucker Carlson clip, unless you wanted to reiterate anything or just wrap up on the institutions part of it.
Oh yeah, no, I think we've covered. I mean, there are a lot of other things that we could point to with regards to um specifically with regards to the state's many ties with the media, but it's probably better at this point. We can just go straight into Tucker.
Sure. Let's see. So I have to pull up that tab real quick. Hold on. I got this on speed mode now because I am an expert. But real
True.
quick, let's see what Igna said. The story he was going to cover next was regarding January 6th discrepancies, more than just showing the tapes. I think he did a show with the DC police chief after about it on Twitter after. So he's saying that this was the one thing that got Tucker in trouble, he thinks. Let's see. So it had to do with the January 6th discrepancies. I mean, like, more than just showing the tapes. I mean, like, he was allowed to show the tapes themselves. He was allowed to talk about January 6th in the way he wanted to prior. I mean, I don't know exactly the specific discrepancies. I mean, like, wasn't he still talking about that beforehand, or did he not talk about any of that? Or, I mean, like, it doesn't necessarily, matter that, that he was fired. Well, I'm not going to say fired for that, but like, it could have just lined up with that. Like, that could have been a coincidence. But I mean, if that's what you're saying it is, then I don't know. I don't know
Well,
what the
that's the
discrepancies
thing.
are.
And this is actually what we're gonna highlight in the clip is that one of the things that I think libertarians like really need to start highlighting is that the best propagandists will always take they always take the most seemingly anti-state or seemingly I guess helpful for libertarians talking points, and they themselves will actively promote it, and then from that promotion they will promote it in a very like co-opted and politicized way. So like a very so this could apply to January 6th, like pointing out how oh yeah, no, this wasn't a real insurrection and X, Y, and Z, which is true, right? But always watch whatever contextual narrative someone like Tucker is going to spin that in. And the thing is that like this single point is why I think a lot of like libertarians tend to fall for media like him in particular. It's because they hear him say something anti-government or anti-surveillance state, and they just automatically think, oh, that's a libertarian talking point. No, it's a disguised fake libertarian talking point co-opted into a statist narrative. So the best example that we're going to be going over is specifically what we're going to be talking about next. So if you want to pull up the clip.
Yeah, we got it right here. So we'll go over this first, and then we'll re-chat from Ignis. Okay, so let's see. So Liberty Lockdown with Clint Russell talks about how, in his tweet, he says, Tucker Carlson just confirmed, without using the phrase, that Operation Mockingbird is alive and well. It's less than 2 minutes and is arguably the most important disclosure a former corporate news person has ever made.
Yeah. Also, before you click play, the New Hampshire Libertarian Party also retweeted this. So
okay.
Intel agencies have a big effect on what is broadcast on television and what you see on Facebook and Google as well. I mean, they're all up and down Facebook and Google, as I'm sure you know. And, there are a lot of anchors who, including people I know well and have worked with at different networks. I'm thinking of one in particular, a national security reporter who was just a mouthpiece for the Pentagon and the CIA and is knowingly telling lies on their behalf. It's very, very common, very common. And I can think of a number of people at CNN who I know for a fact are doing that exact thing. And so
if you want to pause it real quick.
Government
wow, a government mouthpiece reading reading government narratives specifically crafted by the state. I mean, bro, I mean, those people are crazy doing that. I mean, don't pay attention to me or my program, That's also another important thing to point out about like a really good propagandist as well. And he is really good. He's arguably the state's best. He doesn't even need to say directly, oh yeah, no, I'm not a part of this group. It's all implied by the language. He talks about these people as though they're like some sort of other, Oh yeah, no, I know people in that area who are, X, Y, and Z plants, and that's awful, and X, X, Y, and Z. So he doesn't even need to say, oh yeah, no, I'm not a government plant. It's just implied,
Yeah.
Or or at the very least, it's implied that like, oh, well, we're part of the anti-establishment, anti-government group, whereas these guys are the ones that are actually controlled. So it's basically just playing a deflection game, and that's probably like just him saying that alone is probably one of the best examples of like him taking a seemingly libertarian narrative and then blaming it on, oh, it's just the leftist CNN ideologues, establishment, corporate press,
Yeah, I mean, it always comes down to
like
look what
don't
the
pay attention to me. It's just this corrupting group within the media, and we need to.
yeah, I mean, it's
Oh,
coming down
and
to
just what I
this.
was gonna say is that and then like we need to elect RFK to stop it.
Yeah,
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say it's coming down to this this
Okay, I
idea
think
that
you were
the
cutting out. Yeah.
am I am I good now? Am I good now?
Sorry, I think there's a bit of a network issue here.
Okay, I can hear you fine. I don't know. Can you hear me? Like, am I like cutting out or what?
Oh, okay. I think you're back.
Okay.
Yep,
I
I can
don't
hear
know
you.
what happened.
Can you hear me?
Am
Okay.
I good now?
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I think because I was hearing you cut out a bit, so I'm
Okay.
assuming that I cut out on your end.
No, you were fine. I could hear you.
But yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Will.
I was gonna say that the problem here that we're seeing like is that everybody is pretty much just making it about, oh well, the left is this collective is what's doing it. Like, guys, look at how crazy the left is right now. Like, look at what the left is doing. Look at what the Democrats are doing. Look at what the Democrats want. Look at what the Democrats have done to go crazy. Look at what the Democrats have done now. It just continually goes on and on like that, because I mean, like, first of all, they don't make it about any like individuals here. They make it about this group of people that are just coming after you, and necessarily in their mindset, any individual of this group is just also crazy and coming after you. And it's really just to put the blame on essentially like what people are doing when they say like, blame your neighbors for voting for these politicians. Like it's basically like, okay, well, look at the people that take on this ideology. Like they're the one doing it to you. It must be nobody else. You have to get rid of this ideology if you want to solve your problems.
Right. And to clarify too, like Tucker doesn't even report to the left or like he doesn't really like he doesn't even chill for a particular political party either, or idea really, which I think is what makes him like very, very effective. He claims to be a populist, right? Which is essentially just I back people, not parties, sort of thing. Like because he's been like critical of like the Democratic Party or the left. So like he doesn't even really say like the left anymore. He just says the elites, and so that's like a lot more of
Yeah.
a broad
Well,
term that I think that allows a lot more people to project their own meaning of that term. Like a boomer can say, oh yeah, he's referring to the elites. That just means the cultural Marxist leftist establishment.
yeah, I mean,
But that can also refer to a lot of other things too.
So I don't necessarily know if Tucker doesn't use the terms at all anymore. I'm not an avid watcher of Tucker to exactly know, though. I mean, like he has used that sort of language before, and I know like Tim Pool, who's also he's in media, but and he's supposed to be like the guy that's like fighting the corporate media and all that. Like supposedly that's what it is. But he uses these terms, and I mean, like I've seen him honestly. I think I don't know if it was just me not noticing it as much, but like he uses it a lot. Like based on what I've watched from his stream recently and what I've watched from his clips recently, it's so often that he says that sort of thing. And I mean, it's something that Trump uses a lot too, obviously. That's like Trump literally calls DC like Marxist now. Like he's like, the Marxist Washington is coming after me. The communists in there are just trying to destroy me. Pretty much like it's just outright like they're trying to make it out to be like this ideology is coming after them. And I mean, like on Tucker's end, I suppose the elites are more it's harder to actually see it for what it is, which you're right, that actually is really effective, though I don't know that he completely gets away from it.
Yeah, for sure.
But that was just my point on that. Let's see. We'll finish the video though.
Propaganda from the intel agencies knowingly, and I'm sure they've got some internal rationale that allows them to get up in the morning and face themselves despite having done something that dishonest. But I'm just telling you, bottom line, I know that is true. I'm not speculating at all. And in particular on the national security stuff, there are very well-known national security reporters, and I'm thinking of one female national security reporter in particular, who just reads lies from the national security state. And it's
A woman? Cringe.
wildly frustrating. And it would just make me mad. I mean, even if I don't agree with the lies, okay, but even if I did agree with the lies, I would be offended because they're lies. They're lies. Like when when CIA and the Pentagon were claiming that Bashar al-Assad used poison gas against his own people. Okay, there was no evidence that was true. I mean, maybe it was true. There was no evidence it was true. None. Zero. And I called them out, and they could not provide any evidence. And yet every national security, and it was a big deal. I mean, we killed a lot of people in response. We sent in missiles and killed a lot of people. We took human life in response to that claim. And it was, as far as I can tell,
Okay, so
yeah, and that's another thing. That's another thing that is really, really, really fucking important to highlight, is that propaganda is not about fucking lying to you. Like, that's not what propaganda is. I mean, there are aspects of propaganda that require lies. Every propagandist lies. It's just a fact. They lie all the time. But that's not what propaganda. You can have very, very, very truthful propaganda. The entire purpose of propaganda, ultimately, and particularly from the state's perspective, literally has almost nothing to do with the promotion of any kind of worldview, or even relying on just telling you lies. Like, there were no WMDs. Like, yeah, that's an obvious lie that the state and some of the media that they has been promoting, but the idea that propaganda is just lies gets libertarians to think, oh well, Tucker's telling the truth. He's saying that there were no WMDs, and right, like,
Yeah, it's like, look at this
so that
anti-war
gets
guy, he's
people
on
to
our
think, oh well,
side.
he must not be a propagandist, right? Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
like the
Like,
anti-war people are
he
on our side.
he right, exactly. Like, he's exposing all these government lies. Like, that's that must mean that he can't be a government agent. He's on our side. We're fighting the war against against the establishment.
Yeah, and I
But
mean
at
that
the end of the day,
aligns with the fact that he's like saying
yeah,
it's like the CIA, it's like these federal agencies. I mean, like there are also prominent politicians doing that. I mean, of course, no wonder there are people falling for it. It's just like it's in line with exactly what those people are doing.
right, and that also falls in line too with the problematic idea of, like, oh well, the media is all saying the same thing. Like, the media is all the best example of this is like Ukraine, right? Oh well, the media is all saying this exact same thing about Ukraine, and that's how we know that they're controlled by X, Y, and Z. Well, actually, most media outlets, they actually are saying very, very different things with regards to with regards to, like, policy. So, for instance, like, Tucker is in the more skeptical camp of the whole Ukraine thing, which that also proves, by the way, that, like, major media outlets, they're not all saying the same thing. They're giving you the same subtext, but they're saying very, very different things on the ideological front, and so, or at the very least on the like uh yeah, they're saying basically the same things with regards to subtext, but that's just going to get into my point of what propaganda is. Like, if it's not lies, then what is it? Well, at its core, propaganda relies almost entirely on subtext and or emotional manipulation to basically cause viewers to develop an arbitrarily fixed frame of reference for the nature of certain concepts. So it limits your frame of reference for exploring certain concepts rather than being the promotion of a specific worldview. One of the most important things with identifying propaganda is almost like never read what they're saying at face value. Just always look for the subtext. Um, Primarily look at what they're not saying, what is off camera, what they're implying. Like, not only from, again, like, the words that are coming out of their mouth, but some of the other things that really don't get highlighted enough are that are just as important, if not more, than the actual words, are the expressions. Like, how am I making you feel? I think a really good example to sort of, like, attribute this or to sort of explain this, is like, imagine Tucker Carlson came on and did his show like the liberal media establishment and Biden's laptop, right? Like, if he said it in this very, very monotone way, he would not have a major media platform. He would not have the widestream appeal that he
Right.
does, and the reason for that is because his main shtick is the very way that he enunciates and says things in a very in a tone that gets you to feel something, right? So like when Tucker says something in a very like aggressive and you know, I guess maybe sarcastic way, or in a very like angry tone, what, like, you should be asking, what is he trying to make you feel? Not like think, but like, what is he trying to make you feel? Is he trying to make you feel outrage? Is he trying to make you feel contempt? Is he trying to make you feel like a call to action? And those are really the only things that are important to the propagandist, because really, part of what like what people like Jacques Ellul have noted is that propaganda isn't just this like top down relationship, like, oh, the masses are just there and I'm going to like corrupt them and just inject these things into their brain. It's a very back and forth concept, or it's a very back and forth relation. So most of the propaganda itself is also developed within the user's own mind that the propagandist has given them. So really all the propagandist needs to do is have a few layers of subtext, and just have emotions like outrage, contempt, and like a call to action in their tone and in their words. And then from there, the person internalizing those emotions can build their own narrative of, oh, I'm feeling outraged, I'm feeling contempted, I feel a call to action. And so now in my own internal narrative of reality, I've been taught by, in order to have my ends met, and in order to, have a call to action, I need to go out and protest, right? Like, I need to go out and vote. I need to go out and support this candidate who said, who's responding to my outrage and X, Y, and Z. So for instance, like when you're taught in government schools, that's one of like the earliest things that you're taught is very, very important. Very, very important when you're very young is in middle school and in high school, is you got to vote, you got to protest. It's your civic right, it's your civic duty, and that's how you make change and impact the government. So that's ultimately what all of his audience from his emotional calls are going to react with and going to internalize at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't
And
know
I
if
know
I
that
want
was
to
a
work.
bit of
Yeah,
a
no. I
lot
don't
to
know if I
kind
want
of
to work.
unpack there, but
Right. I don't know if I want to work backward or not with what you just said, but the first thing that comes to mind, because it was the most recent, is that actually when you talk about that, like sort of, keeping you out voting and keeping you there in that position, like, thinking that activism is the right way to go about it. Well, first of all, the claim is the thing that popped in my head was the Libertarian Party as well, because that's what they do. I got into a conversation about this in my Discord where somebody was like, well, like people that were going to engage in counter economics anyway, we're going to engage in them. And they didn't really care whether the Libertarian Party's there or not, because the people that really care about politics are actually just going to go Republican if the Libertarian Party were no longer a thing. But my point with that was that sort of like the Libertarian Party is part of this like multifaceted attack to get people to fall into some ideology. And I suppose the thing I need to insert here is that what you were saying with trying to get people's frame of reference to be shrunk into like this set of things that they can do, the Libertarian Party is just one of those ways. And like pretty much like with your argument there, that like I could see the rebuttal for that being that like, well, if they wanted people to only think in a small frame of reference, wouldn't they just make it one ideology? Wouldn't everybody just think the same thing? And that necessarily just doesn't work, because like people are going to think different ways about things and they're going to come to give different conclusions. So when you can put in multiple ideologies to sort of like represent and make people feel that they're being represented and make them feel heard and not make them feel disaffected, basically if you can insert any ideology from Marxism, conservatism, socialism, whatever, to even libertarianism as what people are supposed to think it is in a political context, you can actually get people to stay stuck there. And actually I do want to also respond to what you were talking about with basically like like Tucker being this like active speaker, because Ignis is here in this chat, and I'll get to your other chats after this, but he says that's just speaking skills too. Basically to say like, oh, well, that's just because Tucker wants to sound good for the audience, he wants to get attention, so on and so forth. But if we're looking at it from a frame of propaganda as well, well, the thing here is that I can actually relate this back to what you were talking about with the GOP debates. We were talking about this, and what you had said to me about the GOP debates is that basically like you have Vivek Ramaswamy is this guy that's supposed to represent like the anti-establishment, and therefore he's also this fiery guy. He's also this guy that's coming in and really like showing the crowd what he's made of, and like trying to get their attention by speaking the way he does, right? Whereas you have these like stodgy people like Mike Pence and so on, and whoever else like that are literally just they seem like the embodiment of what Vivek pointed out when he said like corporate puppets, and it seems like it's almost on purpose that they gave him like these targets to go at. And I feel like it's the same with the media, because you see like these anti-establishment quote unquote people reacting back to like a lot of the things said on the media, and then you'll even maybe see Tucker like talk about how the media is like, oh, they're all like not necessarily all saying the same thing policy wise, but like they all sound the same. Like, don't you see how they all sound like this, and they're lying to you, and they're all just bad because they're not us, they're not the anti-establishment people. I know I just like responded to basically every little thing you said, but I feel like it had to be done because there was just so much going through my mind there on that.
Yeah, for sure. And with regards to like the speaking point, what I wanted to specifically highlight is that like Tucker does have really good speaking skills, but you have to notice that he has a very unique way of delivering a message. Like there are skilled speakers that deliver their message in a very different skilled way. So think of someone like Trump versus Vosh versus Vivek versus Tucker Carlson. They don't all, they're all very skilled speakers. Well, maybe not Trump, but they're all very for the most part good rhetoricians. But they all speak in very, very different cadences and with very, very different tones that appeal to different audiences and like tap into very, very different emotions. Tucker Carlson typically taps into like the outrage and the contempt and the the sarcasm and the basically those emotions for the most part. I'm sure there are others, but yeah, he has a very, very unique way of doing that, and that was really my point. And I also don't think that like him speaking in that way it is because, oh well, the CIA like told him to. I think a lot of these things develop very organically as well, or pseudo organically at least. And I think we've talked about that with the idea of teachers, for instance. Teachers aren't really handed a script, but they promote very, very political and problematic anti-libertarian narratives in government schools. Not because the CIA controls the schools or whatever, but because that's just kind of how they were raised to talk and promote those narratives, from their friends, their family, their parents, other aspects of the state media. So often like propaganda narratives essentially develop pseudo-organically independent of some like direct decree, if that makes sense. So like not
Yeah.
everything has to be a conspiracy, if that makes sense, for
And
for you to be a propagandist.
I was actually going to bring up that point at some point in the stream, because I actually agree with you on that. And I was actually going to ask if you would say that actually lines up with how politicians act as well.
Yeah, I would say that for sure, because a lot of politicians, they just start out they do ultimately start out as normal people. I don't think every single one is approached by the FBI or whatever to to start talking the way. I think some are, some are probably plants, or at the very least, yeah, just some of them are probably plants, like
Yeah.
maybe AOC. I don't know, I'm a little conspiratorial, but I need to see evidence for that, I guess.
Well, AOC was cast for her role, so let's see. We have Ignis saying the story he was going to cover next was regarding January 6th. No, sorry, that was I already read that one. My bad. If it was a slow process, then they could have initiated it at the start of his January 6th coverage. If it was a fast process, then it could have been in response to him undermining their case too much. And then he says, "We just don't know," and stating an assertion regarding it with high confidence is a bad move.
Yeah, I mean, with regards to Tucker Carlson's firing, yeah, again, like I'm not trying to necessarily make any like bold outright claims, specifically with regards to his firing, because I don't know why. The actual reason why he was fired, but I think that there are a lot of good potential cases to be made with regards to certain things over others, like given what we know about Tucker and the media and other things that we've pointed out in the stream.
It's
But
just
yeah,
funny how it
it's the
lines
same
up.
thing with but it's like the same thing with Tate. Like I'm not gonna outright again say that Tate is 100% a sex trafficker or anything, because again we just don't know. But given everything that we know about him, I think it's more than reasonable to speculate at the very least.
Yeah. He said one finds one niche / style. I mean, like we addressed that though. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean,
So
and to be fair too, like he could have, again, like she could have developed that niche very organically, like independent of the state. But it's very clear that I think she serves a very, very important role for the state. Like, so for instance, like we talked about with Andrew Tate, right? He I don't think he was directly approached by the CIA, but if you talk about like, oh yeah, it's the Matrix, they're coming after us, this whole idea of it's these corrupting actors rather than what we would actually point to, which is the government, these wrong people and these corrupt elites in power that are the problem. And if only these guys could be removed, then that would solve all the problems with the state. It's not that he was like a literal CIA plant or anything, but he was definitely at the very least seen by the state and a lot of these proprietary media organizations as someone to, as someone very useful, as like a useful tool to promote. And I think you could probably say the same thing about Tucker's, style and niche.
yeah, somebody's not subversive for saying capitalism's good, work within this the system and rise your way up to riches and be really productive in the white market. I wonder how
Yeah.
that's not a subversive narrative. Honestly, Trump was actually good. Uh, anyway, but
You also know it's bad too when you have essentially you have the state at every turn within not only the edge, and we touched upon this a bit previously, but like within the education establishment, within the media, within politicians, they're all saying the same thing: go out and vote, go out and protest, go out and participate in elections as much as you can. It doesn't. I mean, some of them are obviously saying vote for different people, right? But it's very interesting how all of these same institutions are promoting this thing that's supposedly, going to undermine the very people who are who are promoting these people, who are promoting all these things. Um, Clearly, at the very least, it's within their interests to, promote this thing for you to do. It's sort of like, it's sort of like this. If you're in battle with someone, you're approaching you're approaching a village, for instance, like trying to ambush a city, and then the city who you're trying to ambush just
you're
opens up its gates, opens up the city
you're
walls,
cutting
and
out a
just
little
says,
bit there.
"Oh yeah, hey buddy, why don't you?" Huh?
I'm just saying you're getting a
What was that?
little cut out there. Like you're getting a little cut out there.
Okay, I'll just sort of
Yeah.
repeat again,
No,
but
rephrase it now because you're good. You're good.
you know, right, yeah. So let's just say that, yeah, you were some, you know, uh, warlording gang or whatever. You were trying to approach the city, um, surrounded by this brick wall or whatever, and then suddenly the city state just opens up its gates. You're right outside the door, and then they just opened up its gates and said, "Hey, buddy, come on in. Why don't you come on in? Go and attack us." You wouldn't think, you wouldn't think, "Oh shit." I mean, they are telling me to do this, but maybe that is the right thing to do to actually undermine them. Maybe it isn't a mousetrap or whatever. And it's really interesting that is just one of the biggest traps that I feel like a lot of libertarians get into. Even if you're going to debate about like, oh, how essential is politics, like you have to admit, even if you're, a little, you think that politics might be an end to maybe solve some things. I think you have to admit at the very least that like, for the most part, this is something the state wants its citizens to participate in, at the very least, because it's not a subversive tactic or idea. There's a reason why, like, voting and protesting is promoted in 8th grade textbooks, but illegally creating the Silk Road isn't.
Yeah, and I mean, did you get that from anybody in 2020 where they're like, well, it doesn't matter who you're going to vote for, just vote.
Oh yeah. That was promoted. Yeah. That was promoted. Like, I think I remember seeing it promoted on SNL. Yeah.
Yeah, let's see what Ignis says. Perhaps they just disagree, and what you point to as propaganda isn't dishonest, and they believe what they say. If you want to include honest statements made in good faith as propaganda, bruh.
Yeah. I mean, I guess. Well, I guess it depends on what you mean, like, by honest. I mean, I think a lot of propagandists genuinely believe what they say. For instance, a lot of propagandists, for instance, for the state. I mean, there's a very high likelihood of possibility that he might actually believe what he says, but that doesn't make him any less of a propagandist, I don't think.
I don't see why Trump would necessarily not have to believe, like, I'm just pulling Trump as an example, would not necessarily have to believe every last thing he says. Like, is
Yeah.
genuine to himself, for him to be like, the guy that he actually is, as far as like being set up to be this, anti-establishment guy again, like, with his arrest and all that. Like, he could believe that the arrest is actually the state targeting him, like the left in the state, because he phrases it as the Marxist DC and so on. But like, I wouldn't be surprised if that actually were the case, that he's like, well, the left must be targeting me, so that's why I need to become president again. But it's actually being
Yeah.
facilitated for him to do all these things.
Yeah, so actually a really good example to point out this sorry, redundancy point, is actually to look to the rise of social media and propaganda. And that's one of the things that I also want to touch upon. If you're chronically on Instagram a lot, or you're you're browsing YouTube, for instance, and you see for instance, that ad made by the that seemed like it was made by like a 14-year-old with the DeSantis clips, whatever, or those little dark age edits, for instance, right? Like, they're not made by government agents, they're not made by like government shills, but they are, like, in the way that they are structured, they are very, very, very propagandistic. They have all of the major characteristics of propaganda, but they're promoted by people who genuinely believe, like, in that ideology. They're just promoting it in a very, like, in a very problematic and propagandistic way that benefits someone like DeSantis, or someone like Trump, or someone like anyone who favors the little dark age edits of storming Ukraine, for instance.
Hold on,
Um,
I got you right here. Just 1 second. Hold on, I'm almost there. Okay.
okay.
All the
Oh
years
yeah,
I
shit.
spent studying libertarian ethics leaving my body after I see a little dark age edit to the boys bravely fighting back Putin, Hitler 2.0 and his soldiers. What a great tweet you made.
Yeah, thanks. Giving me the real press right there.
Exactly. Look, this
Yeah,
is
you
our
should.
propaganda. This
Yeah,
is
go.
libertarian propaganda, right?
Yo, true. Go like the tweet.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. So, okay, well, yeah, and again, I mean, like, it doesn't have to be something that these people don't believe. I don't see like why necessarily like propaganda equals them lying. I don't know what's necessary to that. But I suppose what we could go on, if we want to wrap up with Tucker Carlson, is where he interviews the guy, Larry Sinclair, that claims he had
Oh
gay
yeah,
sex and
yeah,
did hard
yeah.
drugs with Obama. Uh,
Yo, true.
well, yeah, it's it's like an hour long. I watched it on like 2 times speed, but I listened to it thoroughly. And yeah, I just wrote a few notes, I guess. So Larry claims to have met Obama back in 1999, before Obama was a big guy. He was a representative in the House. I don't know if he said federal or like state. I think it was like federal, like the House of Representatives. But anyway, point being, like, the story was that he was introduced to Obama by the guy's like driver, like Obama's driver, like his limo driver, that showed him, like, this is Obama, like, they introduced him as Barack Obama. He's like, all right. And apparently they were in the back of the limo with the partition up, and then like Obama was basically saying, well, I don't know who was the one. I think like this guy might have been the one. He said that like felt like he needed something to be less tired, and Obama understood what he meant, and then they went to go get like cocaine. And apparently the story is that as they were doing this, Obama was smoking it, and then the guy put his hand on Obama's leg because he was like, okay, well, I want to see where this is going, and Obama just let it happen. He says you don't necessarily, well, Larry says you don't necessarily like reject the advance when you're unbuckling your pants and letting it happen, because he said he's been in experiences where guys would try to break his hand for doing that and Obama didn't. So but basically the point of this being like after this, supposedly what they say is that this did happen. Sinclair made these claims at the National Press Club in Washington, and then basically what they're saying is like this guy from Politico deemed it as absurd, so then the rest of the media was like, okay, well, this must be absurd because this guy from Politico said so, and then Tucker introduces the episode by saying, well, whatever happened to Larry Sinclair? And what I find funny about that is like, wait, so is Tucker the one that's like reintroducing this out of nowhere? Like there was nothing to be said about this until now. Like I don't understand why Tucker's necessarily bringing this back. Like just listening to you right now. But during the interview, I guess one of the things that I noticed was that they were talking about Obama and like talking about this story like being suppressed and all that, like the media not reporting it being the case. And Tucker's like, they really wanted Obama to become president. Like like they're talking about like the Democratic establishment, what that is, right? And then Sinclair even stated it like near the end that he was saying that like he believes Obama is calling the shots in the Biden administration. And I know I'm getting like so much out about this before I let you reply to anything, but I was just going to say like my note from this was that like pretty much like the idea that Obama is like controlling things within the Biden administration, whether it's true or not, is like a popular narrative amongst conservatives, and it's not a politically unsafe one. I mean, like I don't mean it's like by that I mean it's not like subversive or anything, because it still supports the idea of there being like this deep state, and Obama just happens to be a part of the inside club, like running things behind the scenes, and it's just because like the leftists are in power that he's able to do this. But that was pretty much my takeaway from the episode. I don't know how much of it you've seen or if you've seen it, but like that's I'll take your thoughts on it if you have anything to say.
Yeah, so like I definitely think that hey, am I cutting out by the way?
No, you're good now.
Okay, cool. I honestly think that this whole thing, what it seems to me, it just seems to be like a last ditch, maybe not like a last ditch, but like a ditch effort to essentially just try and promote Tucker in the algorithm, and just kind of get him a bit, have a bit more of like a headline story. I don't think this is like a big this seems more like a thing to just attract more viewers rather than as something directly related to his normal shtick. I mean, I could be wrong, but like also I've been thinking about this too. Like does anyone care at this point? I mean, Obama has been out of office for so long now. It's like, I mean,
well, you're exposing the
genuinely
Democrats'
haven't.
corruption, and Biden's associated with all these bad people, Obama and Hunter and all that. So obviously that's
Oh
why
yeah,
Biden
true.
needs to be held accountable.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just like I haven't thought about Obama specifically in so long because the media cycle just hasn't focused on it. Obama.
Yeah.
Soda.
Yeah.
Nigga, what? Nigga, what?
Anyway, but point being,
I'm not gonna repeat what he said, but hey, it's true. That is that moment.
The thing is, it like reminds me of just like those tabloid articles you see when you're like buying groceries, and it's like, this lady's pregnant now, like what, the queen's pregnant.
Yeah, Obama having gay sex and smoking crack. Honestly,
first uncovered picture of Michelle pregnant.
Yeah. Also, I think it's funny how the like Tucker Carlson in one of his opening statements for like his show, he was criticizing MSM and a lot of like the more mainstream quote unquote media outlets that he's definitely not a part of. He was being like, oh yeah, no, they're not covering the real stories. They're just covering they're covering Ukraine. They're covering all these other really unimportant stories. Whereas we're covering the actual true deep facts. And then he just gets up to Obama having had sex in the 90s and doing cocaine. What? We're doing real journalism out here.
Yeah, no, I mean this is the thing that
exposed.
had to be said, right? I mean, obviously, to expose the
True.
Democrats and make sure
Just
that,
the
yeah,
media won't cover it. Unreal.
yeah, they
They
say like,
just won't
why don't
cover
you?
it.
He's like, why don't you think the
Yeah,
media
you
will
know that like
cover it?
alien
And
story, like that was.
what?
Sorry, what was that?
Oh no, I was just gonna say Tucker said to Sinclair, he's like, why don't you think the media will cover this? And Sinclair's like, well, they're not honest. Like that's why, bruh. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
but the alien stuff, like yeah, I mean, like Marco Rubio has been talking about that thing for ages, and like he posted to like his YouTube channel to advance his views on there. Pretty much, it's just like clickbait stuff, like to get people to watch.
That's what it seems like to me, but I don't know. I could be wrong, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, but I guess we could get, now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way with Tucker, because I mean, there's really not much to say on that. It's funny to talk about, I guess, like it's funny to look at and point and laugh at. But the actual like topic that I think would be important to discuss here, not necessarily with that, but just like some of the stuff we've been talking about in just elections in general, kind of talking about like the coverage of elections and like what would state media do to effectively like make out candidates to look better or worse, I think is something good to talk about.
Yeah, because I actually had only just noticed this when watching the Republican debates for the first time, or because I haven't watched any you know presidential debates that the state promotes in a really long time, and one of the first things that I noticed was that was like that hand raising moment where they're like, oh, would you support Trump even if he was convicted or whatever, and they all raised their hands, but like DeSantis only looked to Vivek, and again, like I don't think that specifically was a stage thing necessarily. I think could just be a fuck up on his part, but um what that got me thinking, and that got me thinking to notice the specifically like the audience. So for instance, they for anyone who they want the audience to applause for, they have like a rule that's like, oh yeah, no audience applauding, but then they just like allow it to happen. There's like just anytime that the audience applauds, they might have like one of their commentators say no applause, and then the audience just continues to applaud anyway or whatever. And so this whole so it essentially got me thinking to realize like, oh shit, like the very applauding itself is something that um maybe not like deliberately crafted, but it's something that they at the very least allow to have happen to basically get the audience at home to think, oh shit, the audience is clapping for this candidate, like, oh my god, I gotta applause too, I gotta be a part of this, I gotta be a part of this group. And it's like the same thing with like the specifically who's allowed in the audience as well, because they were obviously all clapping for Vivek, and that could just be because they genuinely all thought that like Vivek um was the better speaker. But you got to keep in mind too is that, like the audience that they all allow in has a particular bias, so I'm not like saying that maybe like, oh, they're doing screenings for audiences. I don't know if they are, but it's very interesting how all the audience itself is directly is essentially directly catered to someone like Vivek, who has a very like salesman-y, um who has a very salesman like pitch to to that type of audience.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just thinking about like as well, like the reporting itself that's done like after the fact, like which clips do they choose to highlight in the reporting of the debates themselves? Because yeah, you have like the raw debate, but not everybody is actually like watching that. So like you have like a narrative being spun after the fact, or at least an ability to do so, just because like there's not everybody's eyes on it. It's just what's reported about it is what people read the next morning or view the next morning or whatever. And I mean, I think like the way that that's done plays a role in like the poll numbers themselves, because like you'll see like as like something's reported negatively about a candidate or positively, which the state has an influence in the media is then able to say like, okay, well here's what the candidates are doing good at and the bad at, and that actually is able to translate to how people feel about the candidates themselves. So you have this sort of like indirect ability to kind of guide a candidate forward or just like stop their campaign.
Yeah, also like the algorithms in Twitter, for instance, or a lot of these other algorithms that promote the clips uh, after the event are all also like directly controlled by the state as well, or I guess you could say indirectly, but the actual algorithms of like what type of content gets boosted to the top, tends to be a very specific subset, and is definitely not just a neutral, like an interest neutral way of promoting in the algorithm. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, like, as well, like, something I wanted to highlight was the fact that DeSantis used the word corporate media. I think he used that word or term specifically, not just like corporate press. He said corporate media. It doesn't really matter, but the fact that he's using like corporate media is like this narrative. It's showing that this narrative, since it's being used by a state actor and it's safe for them to use, like he did there, it's pretty clear that this is not a subversive label. It's something that can be co-opted. So basically it's not subversive to be mad at the media, so long as you only believe it's deceitful because it's corrupt, corporate, capitalist, socialist, Jewish, whatever it is.
I mean,
I'm not
the
gonna say what
last one maybe I
doctor it
might be
was.
sure.
I'm not gonna say the race of the doctor.
Oh yeah, no, definitely not. But yeah, and this is fuck, sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was your last point?
Yeah, no, basically just like the term corporate media not actually being subversive.
Oh, right. Yeah. So yeah, like the whole idea of like the whole corporate media, what tipped me off to the problem with a lot of libertarians using that is that it's very like it's fine, but it's not nuanced and specific enough. It's not highlighting the fact that this is the state who has the ultimate leverage over the media. It almost has a sort of like Marxist commie feel to it. Like if you replace corporate with bourgeois, I feel like a lot of Marxists would agree. Oh yeah, the media is controlled. It is the corporate press, the bourgeois press. It's completely independent of the government, who is influencing people to elect to not elect Bernie Sanders, and they're attacking Bernie in the media. It's the same thing with Trump, just kind of mirrored in like a Marxian framework instead of like because they both advertise, like Bernie Sanders and Trump, they both advertise in a very populist way, and that's actually why you see because they promote a lot of the same rhetoric, and they promote basically the exact same narrative, just appealing to different demographics. There's a reason why there actually is a crossover between a lot of Bernie bros and Trump supporters. That's why you're seeing like the the MAGA communists, for instance, or a lot of the people that are like really conservative and watch Joe Rogan, who are like sympathetic to Bernie, because they're
Yeah.
both promoting the exact same populist anti-establishment narrative, but just with different labels slapped onto them.
Right. And I mean, like we could also take a look at how Trump was covered by the media in 2016 and 2020. I mean, 2016, like, and I'm just like saying this to basically say like, okay, well, I mean, Trump's included in the idea that these politicians are being reported a certain way, and we're just kind of getting back to that aside from just the corporate media thing itself. But like, he was in 2016, he was seen as this guy that's like, well, he's going to bring the end of democracy. He's racist. He's misogynistic. I mean, that didn't really stop. But like obviously, like he was seen as this guy as well. At the same time that the people that were memeing him, he was like the most meme-worthy man, and like he's the guy that'll put an end to the corruption. He's like this kind of character that you were describing, like talks a certain way because I mean, like he's able to draw in the audience by doing that. And he still won in 2016, even though he was made out to be this guy that like couldn't win. Like he just won't be in office. And like basically like those who support Trump like claim that it was an attempt, like a failed attempt by the establishment to prevent him from taking office. He just got so many votes that they couldn't stop him, which is just, I mean, not true. I mean, like, would you like some input on that?
Yeah, I mean, with regard to him, I don't know, like being like targeted. I mean, he was targeted by certain media outlets, sure, but again, like the targeting was very much in his favor because of how they promoted it. I mean, there's sort of the old saying of like no press is bad press sort of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think
they like the part of why he won most likely is just because of how much the media or part of the state media promoted him.
Yeah, I think we should look at how he was reported in 2020 to kind of get an idea of whether that holds true. But one instance in which I would say like it actually does is because when he was talking about like COVID at the beginning of lockdowns, he was doing these like daily like pressers, like where he was talking about it. And then once his poll numbers started going up because of it, you actually saw the media not reporting it, or not broadcasting it. I suppose is what was happening. And I mean, like you could say like, oh well, that was the media like trying to stop him from gaining popularity, which is what I heard Tim Pool say. But because of that, I think it's more so just like they were almost just setting him up to not be the victor in 2020, make him out to seem like, even though they are still giving him some press attention just because of how bad they're talking about him, they're now, instead of making him seem like just a racist or whatever, they're making him seem like he's like somebody who brought a plague to America, like didn't prevent the plague, like now we're all suffering because of him. And actually, like, those economy numbers that were so good, because of him supposedly, well, look at what he's done to the economy now. And like, that's how you see it reported. And even at the same time, though, the Trump supporters would look to the economy numbers and they'd say, look at how good he was. And that's why we still need to bring him back. And that's why you were able to see that, basically, like, even with the lockdowns, they would just still like kind of think, okay, well, Trump is still our guy. Like, we can vote for him in 2020 and he'll bring things back. And like, if we just vote for him in 2024, he will bring things back because of look at what he did for the economy
We're
policy
so back.
wise. Yeah. But I mean, like,
Right.
obviously, it's just like this mess of
And I
ideas.
did
Like,
want to.
trying. Well, I was just gonna say real quick, is this like mess of ideas trying to get people to think like either like he is the ender of America, he is the ender of democracy, he will bring about like the worst nightmare ever. He will, he'll bring back fascism because you need to vote for him or else this is the last time you're going to be able to vote. Whereas the right is sort of like leading into like, okay, well, things are so corrupt that if Trump doesn't win, then the left is going to take over and the communists will win. And guess what? There will never be a chance for you to vote again. And it's like just two sides of the same coin there.
Yeah, I mean, and like I've had problems with ANCAPs sort of promoting electoralism a lot of the time, but like keep in mind, pretty much like ANCOMs fall for this same trick where just like you said, like we have to vote for Biden to stop the Hitler. Yeah, sorry, Putin is Hitler 2.0, Trump is Hitler 3.0, biggest fascist ever. We got to stop a fascist from re-entering the White House. I mean, I don't like Biden, but at least he's not a fasci, again, stuff that we talked about a million times. But yeah, just this idea that Trump is the demographics and the platforms that these people promote, I don't know, somehow correlate to what they do in office. There isn't really a correlation at all. I mean, there are, I guess there are some correlations, but again, I probably should have just said causations, but there isn't really a causal link to these, these politicians' platforms and their stated ideology and what they actually do when they get in office. I mean, I think there was a statistic that was like, oh yeah, 2/3 or half of a politician's campaign promises on the campaign trail end up broken. Well, okay, well that's a complete miscorrelate. Yeah, their own stated ideology has nothing to do with their policy. Sometimes it correlates with their policy, and half the time it doesn't. It's like flipping a coin. With any politician you're gonna get, it's basically just flipping a coin with regards to what they're gonna do in office, and that implies that these stated party platforms ultimately have nothing to do with what happens when they actually get in there. I mean, I like the YouTuber MRH Legacy. I like he did a great video on the war on terror, but I mean, a lot of libertarians even point this out. This whole idea of Obama and even Bush to some extent, like promising to, oh yeah, we're going to end the interventions. We're going to end the interventions. No more war. We're going to be a pro-human administration. And then right when they get into office, boom, there's like a light switch. Oh, and then suddenly they start droning, they start drone striking African people in the Middle East, for instance. And you sort of have to wonder, like, why did they suddenly change their minds? They just didn't have the will to do to do it. Well, no, it's because the state needs war to survive. The state needs to create these wars in the Middle East. They need to constantly inflate. I mean, Austrians have been pointing out this fact forever, that the state, in order to sustain itself, needs to create this business cycle. It needs to constantly inflate over and over again. And that's why you see, regardless of what administration or ideology gets put in power, the policies with regards to inflation remain pretty much constant. And the reason for that is because that's something that the state needs in order to survive. At the end of the day, so again, like it's not, I'm not like saying like, oh, it's all economics, etc. But, well, I mean, it is in the sense that all your decisions are economic, in the sense that they're all praxeological, but that's a bit too Austrian nerdy for anyone who's interested. So,
Well, you rizzed
I
me
guess
up
I
with
can
that
end it
one.
there.
I said
What was
you
that?
rizzed me up with. I said you rizzed me up with that one.
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Anyway.
Only real ones know what I'm talking about if you're in the Discord, but whatever.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to talk about, and I suppose this is like one of the most important, I guess it is one of the most important points of the stream today, and which is why like I just have some stuff to say about it, is talking about like the politicization of libertarians, and we kind of want to talk about like, does it work on them? Does state media narratives work on them? Do state narratives work on them? And I mean, we've answered earlier that yes, this is the case. But I suppose we should go more into that. So I think you would actually be the one that would be good to give an introduction on this, though I do have some stuff to say on it.
Well, it works on everyone to a certain degree, and this is something that like to point out too. It's not like that. Oh well, you guys are brainwashed, and we're the not brainwashed ones, and X, Y, and Z. Like, government propaganda. Again, you got to keep in mind that the state, from when you were an infant, they kidnapped you when you were a child and forced you into their camps, their state programs. Everything that you were fed when you were a kid, at the end of the day, came from a state approved institution. If you've ever thought back to, like, any libertarian can tell you this, back when they were a kid, and they were, or they're in high school, heard their teachers say something like, what, like, very, very propagandistic. Every libertarian has experienced that to some degree or another, and this is something that's been ingrained in you from when you were a very, very little kid. And it's very, very hard to break out of that mentality, especially when, again, like we talked about, this is something that's been ingrained to you essentially your entire life. It's the reason why boomers tend to be a lot more, I guess you could say, politicized, a lot more like, thinking the state represents them, and they vote a lot more, and they do a lot of these other things because, from when they were a little kid, something that they've internalized and known as true for the last 60 plus years, they're not going to ever break out of that reasoning. So it's the reason why a lot of young people tend to be open to new ideas. And this is just a thing generally, but it's especially true with regards to government propaganda. It's why usually it's more young people who are, at the end of the day, going to be maybe not less susceptible to government propaganda, but if they were to be broken out of it, now's the time, So I'm glad that we're at least advertising to. I think we mostly have a younger audience, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
or you do, at least.
I definitely make sure my shorts appeal to people that are into memes of today. I'm not giving some night or late night talk stuff over here. But yeah, what I was gonna say is like basically, for I guess this is more common just within the libertarian spaces, like on Twitter, themselves. It's not necessarily something prevalent amongst young people that I was going to point to specifically, just for the politicization of libertarians and how it keeps them politicized, not necessarily politicizes them in the first place, which is that's what you were addressing. But my point would more so be to, like, somebody that feels disaffected, what's keeping them in? And I've dealt with this before, because there was a point where I was like very disaffected, and I was like, okay, well, like, where do I go from here? I didn't really know what the solution was, because because there's nobody really like outright telling you aside from us or some other people that obviously understand. But like the point being, like most people will say, like, well, this is why you have to get involved in politics, this is why you have to cause change from the inside, this is why you have to do this or that. And then even then I was like trying to read some Rothbard to get insight, and something that obviously late Rothbard is more known for is the paleo strategy, and that's something that a lot of libertarians on Twitter accept, is something that they need to engage in, aside from just the Libertarian Party itself. I mean, like they would see the Republican Party as something that they have to affect change within. And so this is why you'll see like libertarians calling DeSantis my next president, or thinking Vivek should be voted for because he has the best policy platform, or calling yourself a neo-McCarthyist because otherwise our country is at risk of being
Bro, he said the words freedom in his speech. It's gonna make us freer.
Oh yeah, that one meme you have. Honestly, like I'm gonna. Well, it has copyrighted music, so I'm not gonna actually play the music itself. But I suppose I could play it for that one clip, because you have that video Ancat Twitter on your channel, right? And like the funniest part about that, let's see if I can find it, because you have the meme in that video, and it's actually pretty funny that you have that there. Let's see. We'll pull it up. So let's see.
Yo, free fucking advertisement for my.
Exactly.
I'm pretty proud of that video, to be honest.
I'm giving you a Twitter advertisement, and now I'm giving you a YouTube advertisement. Look at what we're doing today for you. We're having you on the show. We're doing everything for you today. Okay, so let's actually mute it until we can find the specific part. Oh yeah, it's right here. Okay.
Right after the hop of Pinochet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just gonna. Okay. I'll play it when the clip comes on. So my next, my representative with my future president, who's Tim Burchett, I don't know, but it's his representative apparently. He's posing with Ron DeSantis, and that's we got our boy Ben there, and then.
What? No, dude.
Okay, so Hoppians, paleo lives, and ANCAPs who vote Republican, when you tell them that simping for politicians because they use the word freedom in a speech doesn't actually make people freer.
Yeah, this meme could be applied to like literally anyone in the libertarian movement. If we're talking about the Bernie Bros, this is probably this would apply directly to them. Yo, he said the word labor rights in the speech.
Yeah.
He said he's gonna make healthcare free, so he's gonna do it.
Yeah, and this is definitely what you get from that. I mean, like you have people just mindlessly saying like, okay, well, what's your plan then? Like, what are you even doing? Like, you're not doing anything because you're not voting. Like, you're not doing anything because you're not campaigning. You're not doing anything because you're not engaged in politics itself. And it's really, effective at getting people because of the fact that even the LP exists as something that's there for the supposed like libertarians that need to get in the system and free us. Or people that they're able to convert to the Libertarian Party and say, oh, now you're a libertarian. It really just gets people to come in and say, okay, well, you should still vote. You should still engage in politics. It's still worth your time. And maybe if you even feel a little disaffected by that, you'll have the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire adopting an agorist plant. Sorry, that was a Freudian slip right there. A plank. Yeah, an agorist plank where they're like, hey, we accept counter economic action in the black market. I think they did say gray and black markets, so long as it's not violent. I mean, that's what red markets are, right? But they don't acknowledge that. They're just kind of like, oh, well, as long as it's peaceful activity, then we endorse it, right? But they make no distinction that is not gray or black market activity, right? And then people may say, oh, well, it's just because in political terms that's what people see it as or whatever. They may see black market as something dangerous, or who knows. I mean, but they seem to do this a lot, because I was having a discussion in my Discord today with somebody who was talking about how like, well, because I suppose I'd have to pull up the tweet for the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, because they were talking about why there should be libertarian flags in public schools, because I think it had to do with the kid with the Gadsden flag that got in trouble. I'm not sure if that was the specific case in which this happened. Yeah, I don't even know if I need to pull up the tweet because I don't know if I'll be able to find it. But if I can, that would be good. But basically the point being here, they were saying that, okay, well, the libertarian flag actually needs to fly in every school, and if you disagree, you're actually like a bigot or whatever. Let's see. Let me see if I can find
it. I don't know if they're joking. I could see, because I see you were defending they weren't joking, and I could see that too.
I'll explain it in a second once we look at the tweet. Okay.
Right.
Here. Okay, so they say that just being opposed to a ban on the Gadsden flag isn't enough. The Gadsden flag needs to be hung in every government school, so libertarians know they're safe. They're hung. It needs to be hung.
Yo, like me? Holy
Doesn't
shit.
mean hanged. Like, okay, anyway, no. Anything
No,
less than
hung.
this, yeah, anything less than this is anti-libertarian bigotry, right? So, yeah, my point here with that was that, like, okay, they're a political party affiliate, right? And so what they're saying here is that, like, well, the Gadsden flag needs to be hung in every government school so that libertarians know they are safe there. And the only thing that can be considered a joke, in my opinion, here is that, well, I suppose, you know, the just being opposed to a ban on the Gadsden flag isn't enough. Maybe that's some sort of nod to Joe Jorgensen's, like, you know, we must be actively, we just can't be passively anti-racist or whatever. I don't know. Maybe that's a stretch, in my opinion. Maybe they'll claim that. I don't know. But the last sentence in that was that anything less than this is anti-libertarian bigotry. I think that is the thing that can be interpreted as a joke, because it's sort of like trying to say, like, okay, well, you know, you must be bigoted because you don't like this. Yeah, I get that. They're not, like, you know, actually trying to claim people are bigots. But I think the statement itself, the Gadsden flag needs to be hung in every government school so that libertarians know they are safe there, is the thing that, like, isn't really something you can take as a joke just because you read the last sentence. And it's something, again, that's coming from a political party affiliate, that's from a political party, which the purpose of it is to get people to engage in political means, especially when they have questions about political authority. So seeing as this is the case, it makes me very skeptical of the fact that this whole thing would even be a joke. And even so, even if this was a joke from them, I don't think that they necessarily wouldn't be cheering on schools putting up Gadsden flags at the front, right? I don't, or even
Yeah,
inside of the school.
they literally had like a meme where it was oh yeah, if, when you want to be nice toward like communists, but like they start advocating for communism or something like that, and then it just had like a Ron Paul picture turn into fucking Pinochet, you know, like
Yeah.
and again, like to say like, oh well it's just like jokes. Well, no, they actually do advocate like you know, for physical removal, and of course there's the debate over like, oh well, Hoppe didn't mean that, so, you know, but like again, this is coming from the organization that literally thinks that, you know, it's fine it's fine for the cops to be unleashed, sort of thing.
Yeah,
You know?
but like, this is coming from the exact same people that I'm like would also just cheer on, like, and some of them say this as their literal political strategy. I'm not necessarily saying any LP affiliate, you know, or sorry, like any LP member in particular says this. It's just that this is something that would not be something that somebody in this field of like using political means would oppose, because it wouldn't be inconsistent with the political means themselves, is saying like, well, why not put Rothbard or Mises in public schools? Why not have them assign this to children as their literature? And then you'd see like libertarians will saying, well, I guess ANCAPs, like, you know, saying like unironically, like, okay, well, that's a good thing, right? Like, isn't that a good thing? You'll see paleos and ANCAPs saying that. But
Yeah,
you know,
it's the same argument where it's like, oh well it's better if it's better if we have the keys to the kingdom, if
right.
it's better if we're the ones promoting the state. It's the same thing with the like those cartoons where it's like oh yeah, no, if the left gets power first, you know, I mean, there might be some oppression, but hey, it's a pragmatic step in the right direction, right, for us to have the power and wield it against them before they wield it against us, and having that sort of mentality. Well, we gotta propagandize our kids before, you know. That's why when the Mises Caucus LP tweeted that, I didn't really even bat an eye, because I was like, oh, that makes sense. I can see how that would have developed in their own internal narrative of reality, to think that, oh yeah, well, I'd rather you know, as a pragmatic step toward freedom, we should have these books banned, and, you know, these libertarian books, quote unquote, be promoted to schools, you know, by the government.
Yeah, and I mean, Pete Quinones, who eventually just went like, you know, full Hoppian, right, as the meme goes, pretty much like he went on Tom Woods back, I think this was like 2022, either at the beginning or end of 2021. I listened to it at the beginning of 2022. I think it was a fairly new episode at the time. His point was that like, okay, well, you know, why are you putting your kids in like, or why are you taking your kids out of public school? Actually, this was his point. Like, why are you not putting them in public school? There are other parents that are sending their children to public schools, and look, here you are not putting your kids in in public schools? Like, why are you trying to stay away from the fight? Why are you trying not to be advocates for like children's rights in the parent teacher meet, or I guess like the PTA meetings, and you know, at the school board meetings? Like, why are you not there? Like, you know, why are you not keeping your kids here so you can go to that and actually fight the fight? Because not everybody's going to pull their kids out of public school. Okay, so what? Like, why should I subject my kid to you know, the government's propaganda, and you know, put them in this camp and like for a set amount of hours a day to rob them of like their youth because other parents are doing it too? Like, okay, but that's kind of like what you get when you see this as your way of affecting change. Like when you view this as like the way to change things, yeah, of course you're going to start adopting this as your political strategy. It's like, well, you need to stay on the battlefield, you need to not retreat, like basically, and subject other people to the worst things possible. Just, I mean, not
Yeah,
the worst
it's
things
the
possible
same thing
here, but like terrible
with
things.
regards to like
Yeah, no, go ahead. I was like pretty much finished.
and it's the same thing with regards to. Oh, sorry. I'm cutting in again. Yeah, sorry. I don't know what's going on with my Wi-Fi and whatnot. It seems to be fine, but you're
Yeah,
cutting
I'm
out.
hearing you fine. It just sounds like you're coming in as I'm about to finish what I'm saying.
Yeah, you just keep cutting out. I might just have to wait for it to refresh again. Can you hear me okay again?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. I don't know what the problem is here. I don't see any Wi-Fi thing on my end. It might actually be your end.
Okay, weird. Yeah, it's just that you're becoming a little glitchy in the audio department. So apologies for anyone watching.
Okay.
Okay, you seem to be back now. Okay. But yeah, shit. Oh yeah, I was gonna say this is the probably the biggest problem with libertarians trying to frame things around policy, like policy proposals. I think Per Byland had a really great talk where he demonstrated the problem with this with regards to immigration. You know, the classic immigration debate is it's either this open borders policy or this this closed borders policy, or it's this high tax rate policy versus this low tax rate policy, or this regulatory policy, or this quote unquote deregulatory policy, which again, like, none of these things like actually do anything to subvert the state's claims over property. They still have the same leverage over you. You're not really freer. But like even getting aside that, he pointed out how it's problematic for libertarians to treat things in this form of property, or in this, through policy or through like consequences. And he applied this to, the border debate, where it's not a debate over this open borders policy or closed borders policy. Those are just distractions and red herrings. The real debate is over property rights and who has a legitimate claim to the property and who doesn't. And so it's not about advocating for this certain government policy. At the end of the day, it's just a question of, is this property legitimate for people to homestead, and is it unethical for the state to enforce these claims on property. And I think Liquid Zulu touched upon this as well. But I would need to talk to him more in depth to see what he thinks about this. But so that's why I sort of think the whole open border versus closed border debate is a red herring. We're not like advocating for either. We're just saying that, hey, this is you have a property right in X, Y, and Z. So yes, the state enforcing this policy is aggressive.
Right. And I kind of wanted to go back a bit just to address the idea that, like, suddenly the state will just cease to exist forever once you somehow like get rid of all the laws on the books. Like, exactly how does that work in the mind of some of these ANCAPs that think, political reform is just the way here? Like, the laws on the books need to be undone by the politicians in office. And once, everything's basically abolished and rescinded, then, freedom comes, and there's somehow like no longer the ability for a state to form. Like, it just, anarchy is just here, and it's here to stay, and like somehow there's no sort of cycle anymore with states coming back where old ones collapse. I don't exactly understand how that works in their minds, but like, of course, like, things don't have to work logically in their minds when they think about it from a political perspective.
Yeah, and this is the problem too with even trying to use politics as this sort of like utility buffer for you to like gain more autonomy and freedom, even economically, is that, well, first of all, even if the state grants you this temporary freedom, like, keep in mind that that's actually them rescinding certain things and allowing you to, for instance, like, them granting you like a tax break or whatever. Again, you doing this through like a legal mechanism, that you still have a greater amount of leverage placed over you, the state can utilize to influence your the way you economize, for instance. So unless you, like, I'm not saying that dodging taxes is bad, but in order for that leverage to be actually removed, you would need to do it through a non-legal channel, in the sense that you would need to do it regardless of whether or not the state is allowing you to tax, or to have a tax break in general. So this whole idea of like, oh, well, we're going to gain more leverage by the state allowing us to have more income. Well, yeah, you have more income that the state's allowing you to spend with, but ultimately that income is still gained not only through legal means, but through means that the state can now use against you and to influence your economic incentives. It's the same with deregulation. But there's another problem with that point too, is that again, through Congress and through legislation, sort of what you pointed out earlier, is that, yeah, you changing the law, ultimately saying, oh yeah, well, the law has changed now, the tax rate is X, Y, and Z. That doesn't actually translate all the time, or that will never perfectly translate to the actual policies that the state does, because ultimately these are just promises and words on a piece of fucking paper. They can say, oh, well, we changed our law to have lower tax rates. Well, okay, the state still has a military. They still have an army they can send to your door to increase to collect the same amount of taxes anyway. So this whole idea that, oh, well, we're undermining the state, or we're actually getting there by having the state write down these decrees. Again, it just doesn't do anything to even get us marginally closer. And of course there are the problems with, like, oh, well, that's just why we need to focus locally, but again, we've already touched upon that. Local government. I haven't heard a very good explanation as to why, the structure of the federal government is somehow any different than the structure of a local government. I mean, there are differences in the sense that local governments are de facto puppets for the federal government, but in the same sense, they're still governments. They still operate the exact same way at the end of the day in the
And it
United
just ignores
States.
the idea that they were established
It's the
by
same with
the
It's the same with city governments and
I was saying that it ignores the idea that they were established by the governments above them, and that they're still regulated by them, as if they have any sort of different interest. I mean, like, yeah,
Well,
they do have their own interest to an extent, but like, they're not going to act if they do act in a way subversive to the government above them, obviously it's not going to work out.
Well, that too, but like primarily the fact that California is a state, like not the state in which the United States, but in the state that libertarians talk about. The the California has this monopoly on arbitration in this given area. um it ultimately is a small state that so yeah, there's this territory of a state, but there's a larger encompassing state that exists. But even if that state didn't exist, there would still just be 50 different states. And
Right.
there's the whole Hoppe quote about 1,000 Liechtensteins. Again, I think we've touched upon secession a few times, I think, and the problems with that. Actually, a really interesting um sort of tangent to go on, that Jacques Ellul pointed out with with regards to the shift away from monarchies to democracies. This is something that Hoppe primarily focuses on in Democracy, the God That Failed. The the supposed political advantages to having a monarchy to a democracy. And again, we've already touched upon the problem with, like, governments decreeing certain things or organizing different ways being this somehow big advantage to libertarians. Even getting aside from that, Ellul pointed out is that, like, there's been this massive transition that we've seen historically. Sorry, this is a tangent, but I'll make this point really quick. There's been this historical tangent throughout history from monarchies to democracies in the modern world, and in particularly the Western world. And he actually points out that a lot of these political shifts can actually be attributed to the fact that political affairs, as the state has evolved throughout the centuries, have encompassed a larger array of people's day-to-day activities, in the sense that like everything is becoming political. During the 16th century, yeah, there was just the king, and you paid like 1% in taxes, and you weren't really thinking about politics at all. And the government didn't really play a comparatively large role in your life, unless of course you were going to get like tortured or beat by your anarcho-feudal lord or whatever. But
Or married.
Huh?
Or married.
Yeah, exactly. But as the modern state has developed, we've seen not only taxes increase, and this is something that he points out, is that we've seen taxes exponentially increase. We've seen the amount of political involvement in our own regular day-to-day lives has just become so prevalent that over time there's become almost this necessity for states to start marketing differently. Obviously, like, the organization of the state hasn't really changed, but what the shift from monarchies to democracies is really just a shift in organization and minor organization, but primarily with regards to the shift between monarchies to democracies. It's been a shift largely in rhetoric and how the state, like, I guess, advertises itself toward the citizens, or how it has a relationship with the populace. And I guess my point with that was that the state has found a need to essentially shift up their demographics and the way that they advertise to people, getting them to think that, oh, well, it's not just the king who controls me and overlords me. No, I actually have a hand in, not my own oppression, but like a hand in the government, and I'm represented by by these people, and I actually have a say in what the government does. That was actually a large part of the reason why the U.S., for instance, I think developed largely in the way that it did, is because a lot of the reaction among the populace, toward the British Crown, was a level of government oppression and involvement in their own daily lives that previously just wasn't a very, very normal thing. So
Yeah.
they wanted to see more, like, quote unquote representation, instead of just being satisfied with a monarch or whatever. But yeah, I've been rambling for a long time, so you can deconstruct any of the points that I made.
I was just going to say what a great form of propaganda that is, and I think that actually kind of just brings us, I mean, to the end of this, because we're seeing like how big this goes and how long it's been going on for. But I was going to ask you a question first before we get to closing thoughts. What do you think those feudal lords did when a guy was getting married to a real ugly bitch? Like, did the feudal lord just go, I just don't know about this one, she's a little too big?
Well, yeah, they just didn't cuck those ones.
Okay. So the strategy to not be cucked in feudal times was to marry an ugly woman.
Yeah, but then you don't like get good sex. So, well, I mean, I don't think, I wouldn't imagine
itself.
Or just getting to look at like a non-ugly person.
Well, yeah,
I mean, yeah. Well,
she'll still
I mean,
for
yeah,
you.
I guess that. Oh yeah, shit. Yeah, that's probably what a lot of feudal lords did. No, honestly, that was my favorite anarchy, feudal Europe, stateless social order.
Oh yeah, the meme as it goes, like life today is just clicking at a keyboard all day, depressed. But life in feudalism, it was great. You just carried buckets to your home, and you just had a nice lawn that you didn't have to, worry about, looking so bad as it does today because of these cities.
Bro, but he claimed that it wasn't perfect, even though he did say that it was near stateless.
Well, look, in every instance in which Hoppe claimed that feudalism is preferable to democracy, he also said that anarchism is preferable to feudalism, but also that anarchism optimally would kind of act like feudalism.
Anarchism basically would be feudalism, yeah. Oh, and it would basically be monarchy, but like
Yeah.
instead of it would just be private lordships instead of government ones.
No, it works out
It
just
would just
fine.
it would just be 1,000 Liechtensteins, but then they just all privatize themselves.
Well, yeah, and each Liechtenstein is just a feudal lord running it, right? So there you go.
Yeah, like I feel like this is just the reason why I feel like a lot of like the Ancat memes have developed in the way that they do. I used to always think that they were straw men's, but then you sort of you read people like Hoppe, and the logical conclusion of a lot of their ideas literally just includes basically just a private company, basically just a state, but calls itself a private company, like a private monarchy owning the Liechtenstein territory or whatever.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess we could move on from that for now because we're pretty much entering civil offenses Godwin's law, where any conversation happening on
Yeah,
this
we're
show
gonna
will
have.
somehow reach to Hoffa when gone on for long enough. No, I'm
True.
kidding.
Yeah.
It's just funny. It's a meme
Well,
at
it's
this
also
point.
like because I do want to like appeal. Huh? Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it's just a meme at this point on the show.
Yeah, for real. But yeah,
And
I mean, I do want to appeal to like the more. Go ahead.
no. I was gonna let you say what you're saying. I think there's just a delay right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think the appeal of sort of Hoppe's methodology within Democracy: The God That Failed, like I sympathize with the people who internalize it and read it and think like, oh shit, he's fucking spitting facts, bro. Like, democracy is the sham, and I do think democracy is a sham, but I think that it's a sham in the way that most Hoppians don't see it, because like ultimately the idea of democracy, you know, predicates itself on the notion that like the voters control what the state does, in the sense that oh well, if the voters elect these representatives, then that's what influences these state policies. And that's why within books like What Must Be Done, for instance, he calls for people who don't have legal private property titles by the state shouldn't be allowed to vote, which is just another whole rabbit hole that we can go down. But I guess the point that I wanted to highlight was just that, like, yeah, like no one's arguing that democracy is this good thing, but I'd like to argue a more radical position, in the sense that like the very idea of democracy itself is a propaganda tactic used by the state to get you to think that the masses or the mob somehow controls what the state does. Like obviously mob rule's bad, but that's not actually what how democratic countries operate. The state doesn't just, whenever the mob says they want something, the state doesn't just be like, oh shit, all our fucking military, all our police, like, oh my god, you guys rule over us. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We gotta listen to what you say. But that's literally what people think that democracy ultimately is. So no country on earth is a true democracy, or is an actual democracy. There are just countries that advertise themselves as democratic countries. And it's the same with, well, I guess it's the same with monarchies. Monarchies, like, they admit that they don't actually, that the people don't actually rule or whatever. But yeah, I guess that's just the point that I wanted to make, is that like there's a more radical critique of democracy that would ultimately, like, yeah, it would undermine Hoppe's critique of it, because Hoppe's critique relies on the idea that democracy isn't even a thing. But I think it's a more substantive critique that allows you to not like abandon any of your principles, but I guess have a more sophisticated understanding of them, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So with
So
that being
yeah.
said, I was just wondering, as far as today's topic on propaganda, media, elections, since it's about that time, did you have any closing thoughts on the subject?
Um, Honestly, I feel like we kind of touched everything that I wanted to, for the most part. I mean, for a 2-hour stream, I think we did a pretty good job.
Yeah. for me, the thing I wanted to read out, just because it's a message I sent to you and then I resent it in the Discord today, just because I thought it was an important point, is just that, in regards to libertarians and political means, it's become clear to me, and this is just me reading from it, it's become clear to me that libertarians haven't engaged in counter economics as much as they would politics, not only because there are still white market incentives allowing people to live comfortable enough lives under it, but because politics demands you to pay close attention and invest the majority of your activism efforts into it. So long as they believe politics works as a means, they'll continue to fall for the propaganda telling them you must educate yourself and others on policies and policy platforms, volunteer, vote, and run for office. And basically what I'm just meaning to say by that, and I think that's actually the point I wanted to make most today, was just that political means being sold to you are something that's meant on top of your white market job to distract you from what you could be doing, counter to what the state necessarily wants you to be doing every day of your life, and pretty much just closes you off from understanding that there are actual means to reach your ends, rather than just falling for what the state tells you to do continuously and just continuing to play its game to know good results for you.
Right, exactly. And this is also kind of why I did want to bring up one more point, because you reminded me of something. I think this is sort of why I tend to be more fond of like the agorist leaning variants of Austro-libertarianism rather than like the traditional Ancat variants of Austro-libertarianism, because I think that the very idea of the black market or counter economics is essentially, if you look at like what the core of like what are black markets, they're markets that don't have any control over by the state, right? um Obviously not taxed, but also just they don't have any control or leverage put over by the state. So if you had a 100% black market, that would just be a free market. That would be in the Agora, or that would be the libertarian condition of freedom. So like even political libertarians like need to admit is that if there is an entire market that's not under control of over by a third party or the state, then that is what we're working towards. So we are ultimately working toward the black market, and also coincidentally the anarchist flag, black, pretty nice. But what I find even more interesting is that because of that, like counter economizing is probably the one thing that the state absolutely does not fucking want people engaging in. And it's the type of activity that, like, at the end of the day, I think that, like you pointed out earlier, that I think is that one of the primary things the state does through its propaganda narratives is to keep people from getting near the black market in the way that I've described.
Right.
And keeping people away from the black market as possible. And I think the best way to do that is to promote politics as a way to achieve your end. Because again, like if you're again like so focused on political campaigns, you not only can't you're not only less focused on studying the state, as an organization, what its incentives are, how it oppresses people, and how it operates. You're thinking about Vivek or something that Trump said or whatever. But you're also more than likely not really engaging in this type of subversive practice because you think that your ends can be achieved through these other mechanisms, if that makes sense.
Right.
So you're essentially shielding yourself from truly subversive activity, or making yourself more safe from the government, as opposed to as opposed to directly heading straight for it.
For sure. And I mean, I think that's a pretty good note to end on, but I'll go ahead and let you get in anything you want promotion wise. I know you have a YouTube channel that we did cover on here, and your Twitter account, but if you have anything you want to shout out or anything you want to talk about in regards to any sort of progress on the video essay you've talked about multiple times on the show, or just re-explain it for the people that are unfamiliar, feel free to do any of that.
Yeah, so I'm currently in the progress of very, very slowly. It's going to be a long video, but working on a video essay covering the history of the libertarian movement. I'm also going to be doing probably before that, I'll be releasing a introduction to anarchism, and just it's not going to be like any kind of formal ethical ethical breakdown, but it's going to be more of like one of those videos that you know want to show your mom or dad who just freaked out because you called yourself an anarchist or whatever. You know, to make sure that you're not an actual insane person and you think pretty normal, regular things that aren't even that controversial. But yeah, so I'm working on the video. It's going good, longer than I expected. I've been having a bit of a hiatus just because I've been sick recently, but yeah, just subscribe for any kind of content if you like. Basically, if you like anything that I've said on the stream, or you maybe don't but are interested in hearing it, then yeah, definitely go subscribe, turn notifications on, and videos will be down the pipeline
We know you're
in your
getting
subscriber feed.
We know you're sick, man.
Oh yeah, speaking of pipe,
I was gonna say sick of getting
no, bro, speaking
laid.
of piping. True.
Speaking of piping, what?
Hey. Wait, what?
Let's hear it. Speaking of piping.
Oh yeah, no, that's just it. Speaking of piping, you know, a lot,
Okay.
you know, some people are plumbers. That includes me.
Yeah, Ancat the plumber. All right. Well then, you can find me at Civil Offense on social media that I'm present on. I think it's you know, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. Yeah, I have a TikTok, stuff like that. Find me on YouTube.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, I do have a TikTok. I post clips on there, and I have not been banned recently.
shit.
There have been clips where I've gotten banned or gotten them removed from TikTok because they say it's hateful ideology, and it didn't necessarily have to do with agorism. It was stuff that that had to do with some of my other takes. But you know, that being said, it's still something to follow because it's a good account. But if not, you can find the shorts and reels that aren't on there on YouTube and Instagram. And yeah, I guess just go to my website, ahmedmlih.com. You know, just follow my email list, whatever. It was good having you guys here. Thank you for watching. And remember that civil offense is the key to winning. Thank you.